years ago in rural Arizona, we shared a pond with the crazy neighbor. More sad than anything, he was in his 40s and lived with his mother around 1988. A Vietnam veteran, he would walk out to our shared pond with a .45 and a box of 50 rounds. He would then absolutely unload on the pond while yelling "Police is brass" and walk quietly home. This happened every 90 days for about 3 years. This woman lived next to us who needed to have the police called on her at least once a week. She would scream at her roommate at all hours of the night, go into a drunken and sometimes drug-filled stupor, and scream at us while tripping out as we sat in our backyard. More than once I had to kick her out of our home because she walked in unannounced, beer in hand and drunk as ever. One time I called the police because she was screaming about killing someone and rolling around on our front lawn. Another time I received a call at work, 1 in the morning as I worked third shift. My GF informed me they had to evacuate the house because the neighbor's garage was on fire. It turned out either she or her roommate had done it while doing drugs or smoking in the garage. She ended up moving away but would still walk to our house to ask for our lawnmower. She was not happy when I told her to get off my porch. I used to work nights at a hotel, and those were always my favorite calls to get. Yes, hello. The crickets outside are really loud and we can't sleep. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'll just go have a word with them and see what we can do. This happened disturbingly often. I'm still not sure what they actually expected me to do about this at 1 a.m. When I first moved in, my neighbor walked into the house unannounced. When my wife gets home, sometimes she wants to stay in her car having a phone conversation. He will come out and walk down the side of his house, checking his sprinkler controls and looking at my wife. He has 2 huge bushes he refuses to cut. It blocks our view of backing out of our driveway. The fire department came by to clear trees and bushes around the fire hydrants. The neighbor came out and yelled at the fireman, "This bush is older than you." Needless to say, I hope there are no house fires. She stalks us. Like every time I get home, she'll walk outside and tell me I was either 3 mins later getting home this time or that I'm home 2 mins earlier, and then ask me why. One time my friend and her sister came to pick me up. The neighbor was against her window, with her hands and face pressed up on the glass, trying to look at who was coming to pick me up. My friend and her sister were so terrified. They called me telling me to hurry up, because a crazy lady was staring at them through a window. I replied, "Oh, it's just the stalker neighbor." Yeah, that was a funny day. We bought a house, and on the day while we were unloading the first truckload, the neighbor came into our garage uninvited and started telling us what trees on our property he wanted us to cut down. Not the craziest, but the fucking audacity of some people. Not sure if this counts as crazy, but I have this neighbor who is part of a spiritual organization called Brahma Kumaris. Every time someone in the neighborhood is going through rough times, especially deaths in the family, she goes to their house, and instead of offering condolences, she preaches how they should join this organization, and things will be better. She doesn't acknowledge anyone the rest of the time, except the time when someone dies, or a new family moves in the neighborhood, to whom she preaches and gives books written by leaders of the organization. We had a neighbor with severe anger issues, and yelled at anything or anyone he didn't like on the street. A few years ago, he had a road rage incident, and when he started banging on the other car's windows, the occupants got out and beat him badly. During this, he had a heart attack, and now barely has enough mobility to walk to the mailbox and back. Also, he doesn't yell anymore. He murdered another older neighbor lady, beat her to death with his bare hands, in the middle of our townhome complex. Well, it was actually her daughter and granddaughter that are my neighbors, but she was visiting them like she does every week. Next thing you know, detectives are knocking on my door seeing if I knew any information about him or the incident. The only thing I knew was he was always arguing with other neighbors. I looked him up on Facebook after the detectives left, and he had posted he was going to kill her 30 minutes before he was going to do it. Took pictures of her car and her daughter's house and posted it on Facebook with her address saying, "I'm going to get the bitch." Then after it happened, he posted, "Got the red-headed old bitch." It is just crazy to me that at 5:30 p.m., broad daylight just a couple yards from my door, he killed her, and no one saw it happening. My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and truck. And over the course of a few months, I realized that she was no longer parking her car in her garage like she had for the many years prior to that. Then suddenly the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles because she was walking down to a residential construction site about a block away every evening, and she'd grab 2 2X4S and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage, and when she was questioned on what she was going to do with it, she didn't have an answer. The neighbor behind us had a leak in his water pipe, and rather than fix it, he just had the sump pump drain it out into the backyard. This meant that all year round the back of our yard was a little bit damp. Eventually, the leaky pipe burst and filled the house with 5 feet of water. His solution to this was just to keep the pump running and flood the entire neighborhood. After about an hour, a posse of all the neighbors whose yards were being flooded confronted him and called the city to shut off the water. The city fixed the water pipe, and the neighbor ended up with a large fine. At least my yard stays basically dry now. I should also mention that this neighbor once rented that house out to a bunch of crackheads, and it nearly burned down because the ex-girlfriend of one of these morons snuck in and set the house on fire.